What is ritual? Throughout the discussion of whether or not people fear death, I mentioned repeatedly the theories that rituals were part of how people deal with death-related anxiety. So what is a ritual? A ritual is a sequence of activities. It may involve gestures, words, actions, and/or objects. Rituals may or may not be part of the traditions of a society, culture, community, or family. All known human societies have featured rituals of some kind. These rituals are not just spiritual and/or religious, but also include secular and political rites. There are multiple definitions of ritual, just as there are of death and life. In psychology, the term ritual is used to describe any repetitive behavior used to prevent anxiety. One definition is that a ritual is a set activity, or set of activities, that to an ignorant outsider would appear irrational, non-contiguous, or illogical. The English term ritual derives from the Latin word ritualis, meaning that which pertains to the rite, Latin, ritus. Ritus was the proven way of doing something, as in the correct custom. Some scholars of ritual studies claim rituals are characterized, but not defined, by performance, invariance, formalism, traditionalism, sacral symbolism, and rule governance. You can see more information on this if you look up the writings of Catherine Bell. The performance of a ritual creates a theatrical frame around activities that shapes a participant's experience of the world. This cognitive ordering is meant to reduce the chaos of life and impose a more coherent system on it. Invariance means that the ritual is done more or less the same every time, sometimes to very careful exactness. The exact repetition may be done by a single person, but may also be performed in unison by groups. Sometimes the invariance is meant to shape mental and emotional states, such as when martial arts or meditation takes the same form every time in order to induce a particular state. Formalism refers to a formal style, sometimes referred to as a restricted code, which may take the form of ceremonial, stately styles of behavior and oration. Traditionalism varies from formalism in that even if a ritual isn't formal in style, it may appeal to or be established on historical precedent and traditional mores. Sacral symbolism refers to ritual expressing, relying upon, referencing, and working with existing signs and symbols of religious, spiritual, philosophical, and/or political ideas. These may not be overtly religious, such as a cross, but also something like an eagle representing freedom, or the bound fasces representing unity. Rule governance refers to the fact that many rituals are governed by rules that impose limits and restrictions. This also contributes to a feeling of a societal unity in that everyone has to follow the rules. There are many types of rituals, although they tend to fall into three major categories. These are rites of passage, communal rites, and rites of personal devotion. A ritual may fall into one or more of these categories. There are many more forms of ritual, which we will only touch on lightly. Rites of affliction, wherein the ritual seeks to mitigate forces that would inflict harm on people, whether that's illness, bad luck, reproductive issues, death, etc. They tend to involve some form of establishing cause, sometimes via divination, and then rituals to purify, exorcise, and protect. Calendrical and commemorative rites, which mark particular times of year or fixed periods of important events, such as the changing of the seasons, the period of planting or harvesting, etc. Rites of sacrifice, exchange, and communion are those in which the ritual is meant to placate or please the otherworldly and the divine. Rites of feasting and fasting are those in which the community draws together for a cultural performance related to the presence or absence of food. Rites of festival involve those in which large communal events create a social drama. Rites of rebellion, where societal rules are seemingly turned on their head for a period and then reestablished, such as during the festivals of misrule. Rites of water, as water is a deep and central need to all cultures of the world. Rites of fire, as fire is often a deep and central need to cultures. Fertility rites, which are meant to stimulate or protect reproduction in animals or humans of a society. Sexual rituals, which involve the behavior used to stimulate or restrict sexual activity. Political rituals, which construct or maintain power or oppose power. And death and mourning rituals, which are one of the rituals found almost universally in human culture, and which are meant to deal with dying, death, the dead body, and beliefs of what may happen to the spirit of a dead person. As you can tell from this list, there is a great deal of overlap of all of these, where they blend into each other, they sort of Venn diagram, and some Rites and rituals could easily belong to more than one category at once. Are death rituals a form of rite of passage ritual? Arnold von Gennep theorized in his book Rites of Passage that death ritual was a form of rite of passage ritual. A rite of passage generally changes an individual's social status. A communal rite is collective and establishes community, and a rite of personal devotion is individual, such as a pledge to do something, join a military unit, follow a set of laws, marry someone, etc. Rites of passage may include transitional stages of age, adoption, baptism, graduation, engagement, marriage, and more. He theorized that rites of passage generally consist of 3 phases. 1. Separation, during which the initiate is separated from their old identity through symbolic and/or physical means. 2. Transition, during which the initiate is in liminality, where they are stripped of their old identity, but have not yet gained their new one. These may be brief or long and marked by training or ordeals. And 3. Incorporation, wherein the initiate is confirmed in their new identity. In this case, the phase of separation would be preparing the dying person, giving the last rites, recording last words, etc. The rite of transition would be the period of sitting with the dead and bathing, dressing, and preparing the body for burial or destruction or whatever's happening to the body. Transporting the body to the burial site or disposal site, and preservation and/or destruction of the body. And the phase of incorporation would be the transition of the spirit to the immortal plane and then the mourning period. In the case of death, the individual would leave the preliminary state of living, move through the liminal phase of dying and death, and move on to the post-liminary state of being dead. Questions to consider. What do you consider the most important role of ritual? What are some ritualized behaviors you engage in outside of a spiritual and/or religious context? Are there rituals you're expected to abide by in the United States that you are opposed to? Are death rituals a form of rite of passage ritual? What is the difference between a rite of passage into adulthood and a rite of passage into the state of being dead? What is a death system? The concept of a death system was introduced by the sociologist Robert Kastenbaum in 1977, where he essentially posited that death could not be considered as an individual experience at an individual moment in time. Instead, a death system refers to the way in which individuals in a society relate to death, their own, the concept of a whole, and that of others, specifically within the context of that society. Any given society would therefore have a unique death system. Death systems are theorized to have multiple functions. One such function is to warn of or predict death, such as elements of the medical system that deliver news to someone that they may be dying, or that inform a family that death is imminent. The exact extent of the warning of death in a death system is debated, with some sociologists including elements of a society that warn of potential causes of death, like epidemics, as part of a death system. One function may be to care for the dying, in cases where death is not instantaneous. Another function may be that it restricts when it is and is not acceptable to kill. Every death system has restrictions on acceptable and/or not acceptable deaths. One function may simply be the disposal of the dead, generally via destruction or preservation. Dead bodies bring disease, and so systems may have developed in order to mitigate the dangers of dead bodies and the physiological and psychological distress caused by them. One function may be to ease societal consolidation after death, as when an individual dies, society has to adjust to their absence. One function that many sociologists argue in favor of is that death systems help people make sense of death itself. One feature of a death system is a set of acceptable rules. These include a society's ideas about who it is and is not acceptable to kill, murder versus self-defense, murder versus war, etc., what is and is not acceptable to do with a dead body, and rules about acceptable forms of mourning. One feature of a death system is that people have specific roles. In both ancient and modern cultures, these may include spiritual and/or religious figures. These spiritual and religious figures may be responsible for elements of the rituals around death. In the modern world, this also includes those whose entire profession revolves around death, such as hospice workers, coroners, and/or funeral or crematorium staff. It also involves the roles that people step into periodically, such as florists who provide flowers for the dead, but also provide flowers for other circumstances, like weddings. One feature of a death system is the role of specific places. These are places where people go to die, places where dead bodies are stored until preservation or destruction, and places where the bodies are preserved or destroyed, and places of mourning. These may be hospitals, hospice homes, morgues, funeral homes, crematoriums, cemeteries, graveyards, etc. Memorials and battlefields may also be included, depending on the death system. Another feature of death systems is time, as in specific time or dates dedicated to recognizing, reflecting on, remembering, or mourning the dead. These may be individual, as in cases where people go to a grave once a year to leave offerings or clean a grave, or societal, such as Halloween, All Souls Day, Dia de Muertos, etc. Another feature are objects specifically related to death, such as burial clothing and or vessels for containing bodies or the remnants of bodies. These include caskets and urns. And another feature are the symbols of death, which may be anything from the very traditional skull and crossbones to specific flowers. Death systems are not static. They evolve and change over time as a society evolves and changes over time. As death is extremely interrelated with other aspects of culture, including religion, philosophy, medicine, politics, and more, as those aspects of society shift, so too will death systems. Questions to consider. What are some elements of death systems in the United States, and what is taboo in one of the death systems of the United States?